Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Marvin Fuentes, the founder of Fowntin AI. We're helping businesses optimize operations and increase profits. Today's guest is Rett Jones from Pivotal Accounting. He's a home services operator turned fractional CFO, helping contractors turn messy books into clear decisions.
My name's Rett. I grew up in the home services industry, so my first job was, of course, roofing before I could be on the family business payroll. So at the age of 16, I was able to start installing air conditioners on my own. Did that all throughout high school and college.
Okay.
In college, I started to go more into sales right around 21 or so. So 21 started going into sales, learning a little bit about marketing and handling a different side of the business, which I'd kind of came from. I ended up graduate. I got the benefit of writing when I was going through business school. I was writing my papers about my family business, which I grew up in. I graduated on a Monday, went there, came to work on a Tuesday, and then was handed the installation department and the sales department, and told to figure it out and run it since I'd known a little bit of both. Started doing that. We grew the company from about 2.5 to three and a half, four. It was, I was blessed to have, vendors, parents and a lot that supported me, pushed into my growth. 2016, my wife got accepted into University of Miami for a graduate program. And so she said, we're moving to Miami. And I said, you know what? Let's go for it. I've never been to Miami before. So we moved down there for a couple of years. I took a job as a retail sales rep that, it really scared me. I was going, me and my wife were going from two incomes. She couldn't work in her program. And we went from just solely me going from two stable incomes to 100% commission base. So it was one of the best things that happened for me. It taught me how to really get into the retail sales area.
Yeah.
Uh, Told him that really worked hard in it, became the top rep down in Miami, Florida, which is a tough market to be in. Within probably about 4 months, and that wasn't anything to do with skill. I just was scared to death and had to make more calls than everybody else. And quickly earned a promotion, took over a branch in Tampa, was blessed to grow it from 1 million the previous year to 4.5. And, that was the 100-hour plus weeks of sales, helping out with installations, doing everything. Within that, after that, got promoted to over the company as a whole. So I was running the company out of Miami, Florida. And that's where I got my first experience on running a 10 to $12 million company. Everything before that had been 4 million. So I stayed with that, ran it for about 10 to 12 months until they got acquired by a different company in Florida. I continued to run it through January. Moved back home. Was quite uncertain, but my family's business had started to decline after I had left. Then their building had burned down in May of 2019, and so they called me, asked me for help. So my wife graduated. We moved back up to Georgia, and then we took it from, it had shrunk down to about 3.5. And so we took it from 3.5 all the way to 11.5, making two small acquisitions before making an exit. I stayed there for about 2.5, 3 years. I left there at the beginning of this year and been working with consulting for other clients. Partnered up with a good friend of mine out of South Florida that I met. We worked together down there, and so now just been doing more on the financial consulting side for some, and eventually wanting to hop back out in a business of my own, another home service business that is.
Yeah. Okay. What more so are you looking to do with this consulting side? What's the goal with it?
Yeah, so what we did is, he had this great idea, and so I joined forces with him, and so he was seeing that a lot of the bookkeeping in home services wasn't quite up to par. All right. And so we worked together for, like I said, for a while. And then through mutual contacts, he ended up with, I introduced him to a different consultant. So he started working with him. And instead of doing the consulting, he was spending the majority of his time teaching the bookkeepers and the accountants how to do that. So what he did was try to realize an automated, delegated system which could clean up the books and keep them going for them. And so now how we help them put together their financials, and now we can actually show them how to read those financials to them. So We get them cleaned up because, I experienced it firsthand when I was running my family's business. After I first came in right out of college, we had my great aunt was doing the books, and she was a great person, like most bookkeepers are. They usually get the job because they're very trusted, they're very reliable. And so, they did good, but you just didn't have departmentalized financials. You didn't have really your labor separated. You had everything recorded, but you didn't have enough detail in order to make, huge decisions. Hey, where's my marketing coming from? Where am I spending most of my labor cost on? Which department is most profitable? So I found that out. And then through a series of different bookkeepers, learning, trial and error, found a good way to start really getting it in there. And at the time, he was at that consulting company. He was helping me do that. And so we kind of learned together. And then, so that's what we do now. We really help get those financials in order to make them readable. And then, like I tell most people, my job is kind of like a translator. I translate financials into home services speak because I know how to install an air conditioner and read a profit and loss and balance sheet. So that's where we really help a lot of the companies thrive at.
Got it. I see. Okay. Which is very important. I feel like a lot of
Oh
people
yeah.
forget about that.
Oh yes.
What does your day to day look like now?
My day to day, and so we got a staff of probably about 80 to 90 people now. And so what we do is, I oversee the team, just making sure everything, all the team members get on there. We have a lot of good people, both stateside and offshore. We, I help oversee the operations as well as work with a lot of the clients. Now, my biggest subset is, usually about 7 million and below. Really has been where the majority of my expertise is. And that's what I tell most people. If you're asking me how to run a $15 million company, I'm not quite your best option. I've never fully ran a $15 million company. I usually try to help out where I know best. And, same way as when I seek advice, I usually seek advice from somebody who's achieved that. And so I try to give my clients the same experience. I don't mind helping them on that, but I'll be the first one to tell them, hey, Marvin, I don't know, I don't know the party rental business. And I can help you with what I know and I'll give you ideas, but I can't fully help you on something that I don't know fully about.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you go about looking for clients at the moment?
So we advertise a lot of we get some through ads. We get a lot through referrals and a lot through trade shows. So we'll go out to trade shows, whether it's plumbing trade shows, heating and air, roofing, solar. We go to there. We usually set up booths, networking, and we're it's not a thing of always trying to sell them, but when you pitch the product and you'll know the people that need it, the ones that'll tell you, hey, my books are a mess. I'm just running a business. My goal is to make sure there's more money at the end of the month than there is the beginning of the month. And those are the people that we really benefit the most. And so we're I get excited about those because once you can help them see, because they're good operators, they know how to sell in air conditioning units, they know how to do the electrical process, they're great plumbers, they're great roofers or sales reps. They know how to do that part, but the money part is always kind of a taboo subject. They know they can put it in the bank, but as far as managing it and putting it into readable or how'd you say proper KPI terms,
Mhm.
that's where they need the biggest help. And so sometimes owners are really good at it, but there's been more accountants and finance people enter the home services space here recently. But for the most part, a lot of our clientele are owners that really came from the field and then started a business. And those are the ones that we really are able to help out the most.
So now you come into businesses and help them with their financials because they're not necessarily experts in that, right?
Correct.
So what are some things that you're not an expert in your current business?
Um, let's see. One of the areas that I have is, for instance, operational systems. So, a lot of the industry for the home services, especially the heating and air, plumbing and electrical side, they rely on one to two, three different types of software. I understand the basics of it, but diving into the details of it, those are where a lot of my struggles are. And I always tell them I can classify transactions, especially dealing with like QuickBooks. All of our clients are on QuickBooks Online, so I can deal with the transactions. I can help classify them, but my strong point is really reading them and telling the story once I've read them. But the actual formal accounting process is one of my weaker points.
Got it. Okay. So now you said you do ads to try to find clients. How does that been working for you?
It's not. It produces some good clients, but it requires a lot more sifting and effort than say a trade show and especially a word of mouth. So, a lot of our clients come from people who own multiple companies and said, "Hey,
Okay.
you did a good job for this. Here's my next company." Or they're in trade groups together, they're in networking groups together, and they say, "Hey, but I would say, Marvin, um, my financials are a mess. I'm really trying to get clarity. I can't make a proper decision." And you say, "Oh, you should call these guys at Pivotal. You need to call Rett. You need to call whoever." And then they would send that recommendation because we've helped them out. And so our clients that really succeed the most are the ones that, embrace us not as always a vendor, which we are, but as a partner. And so, we want to be there for them because if we can help their business grow, that's what breeds that loyalty. I mean, I own my own business, and I was also a kid of my mom and stepdad who owned a business. And I had two stepbrothers, but when you ask them, they didn't have three kids, they had four kids. They had us three, and then they had the business, which was like another kid of theirs. And so any business owner knows, I mean, it requires a lot of attention, a lot of nurturing, a lot of growth. And so, but when you partner with somebody to really help them out with their business, that's where that partnership starts to form at. And especially, if we can take off what I tell everybody, if we can take off that most stressful part to them, which is the finances, then that's it breeds a lot of trust, and it breeds good relationships because we're taking care of a part of their business that is not necessarily their strong point, but financials are extremely crucial.
How does an average contract with a client look like for you? Like time wise, maybe
Yeah,
percentage?
time wise, yeah. So what we do is, we usually set it up with a cleanup phase. So we audit the books ahead of time. So, we usually do an audit just to see exactly what kind of condition their books is. Because I can't really know what I need to do until I see. So sometimes they're pretty clean. Sometimes I get an Excel form, a long Excel list that needs to be moved to QuickBooks Online. We've seen a lot of different stuff. And so at that point, it depends upon the size of the company. I mean, are they doing 3 million? Are they doing 6 million? Are they doing 12 million? The amount of the transactions that we got to clean up. So then we get a cleanup price. And so that's to get the books back in order. And sometimes, this time of year, we're pretty much doing just 2025. We won't go back to 2024 unless they want us to. At the beginning of next year, right around March, April, a lot of clients still want us going back through 2024 to help them clean up, especially for tax time. But then after that, we give them a price for monthly recurring bookkeeping. We help them also out with their CRM services. We got a couple of in-house consultants that really work with those, especially with the financial navigation piece. And then what I do is the fractional CFO side. So come in there, help them read the numbers, make decisions. Hey, do we need to put together a comp plan? How are we structuring our organization? Are we maximizing our warranty process? How much are we getting from our rebates, from our suppliers, from our vendors? When can we afford to hire more people? When can we afford to give raises? Can we buy new vehicles this year? Can we invest in advertising? All these financial questions that you're always wondering about, we
Hmm.
put the confidence behind those.
I see. Okay. Which part of your business currently seems very time consuming?
Mm, I was going to say it's just coming off the beginning of the month. So, of course, today is the 14th. We're looking at the 15th is usually our close deadline, but we're trying to get our books out by the 10th. So the first part of our month is extremely time consuming with helping all of our accountants get the books in order, and get financials published from that. And a lot of that has to do with just sometimes it's going through data, but a lot of it is communication in between us and the client saying, hey, we need this information. Hey, we got kicked out. We need you to reconnect this account to QuickBooks. We need the statements for your Amex. All these different items that we're doing to try to get in. Because if we, anything that we do, if we get the books and the financial statements right, everything else flows from there. And so the most time consuming portion is, supporting our accounting staff in order to get those financials across the finish line by the 10th.
Got it. I see. Okay. And how do you incorporate feedback with your clients?
Mm. A lot of it comes with check-in calls. So, a lot of so some accounts I support, they may not have the CFO side or the fractional CFO side. Some of them come through this, how would we put it? Um, Accounting check-in calls would be the best part. So we meet with them once every week, sometimes in the beginning, then goes to once every 2 weeks, once a month, have our accounting check-in calls. And so that's when they really first come in. And then after a certain period, we're doing the fractional CFO, so we get a lot of stuff there. But then, after 1 to 2 months of doing it, we're on a first name basis. They realize I'm there to help. We're there to grow the company together. And so usually I start getting calls on my cell phone. So if anything's wrong, they know they can call me. I'm going to jump into it, figure out a way to handle that ASAP, just because, as I know, the financials are such a sensitive and important subject. Taking care of it for them is the most important thing.
Got it. Has there ever been feedback from a customer that you got in that really pointed out maybe a flaw in your business that you had to patch a hole in?
Oh yeah, no, and it really comes a lot of times to accounting. So, we work to hire a lot of really good accountants. Sometimes we don't necessarily get those. Right now, we've been blessed with a good team. However, it's had to do with a lot of weeding out, and so that's been some of our biggest ones, as well as so accounting side, just making sure we get all the data in at a very good pace because they're paying us to do this job and they want it done. And most business owners are pretty forefront about what they want. I mean, they're pretty direct and driven on getting what they want. And so even that's if it's getting it from us. The second portion is just communication, just making sure that hey, we communicate with them if there is a hiccup. Hey, if it's not going to be delivered on the 10th, just let them know. We're probably aiming at the 13th, 14th, 15th. If it's, if there is going to be a delay, communicate that to them. If something changes on their account, if we need to change the accountant on their account, just have a call with them and let them know. But biggest thing is if we can keep the communication between the customer in there and the communication between the accountants and the customers, that's going to eliminate 98% of our problems.
Is there any system or maybe just even process in the business that feels manual or just outdated or maybe even just inefficient?
Um, when I work inside of a lot of companies, yes. Our firm, not quite as much. The biggest manual lift is keeping the communication going while it's growing because we're a virtual firm, meaning that all of us work remotely. We don't have like a formal brick and mortar office. So making sure that I can communicate with the team, which is my main job inside the company. I have a job external role, which is, being a fractional CFO. But I have an internal role of the company, which is, being the chief of all the team members. And so part of that I take upon myself is communication. And so how do I know what the consultants are doing? How do I know what the developers are doing? Keeping all of these people, all of the team in communication, because what breeds down a lot of trust in organizations is not knowing. It's even if the result may be good, it's they like to know. And so whether we're switching the way that we're doing our task management, whether we're switching our email system, whether we're switching a process, Biggest thing that we got to do is just continue to let the entire company know. And it gets a little bit harder because we're communicating through Zoom, through Google Meets, through emails, through Slack, instead of being able to have a giant company meeting and saying, hey, now inside companies, we do see a lot of different opportunities there. Mainly, just the way that they're tracking a lot of, let's just say warranty, for example. I do see a lot of companies that leave on the table warranties. So the traditional way that a warranty works is that I have to go to my supplier. If the part is up under warranty on an air conditioner unit, for say, I have to go to my supplier, buy the part, then I have to file the registration. I'm sorry, not registration, but file the warranty claim and then get reimbursed on my account. So I have to buy it first and then get reimbursed. And so a lot of companies will buy it and never actually take the time to file the claim and get reimbursed on there. So you're not charging for a part, you're just charging labor on those. And on that, now the part cost is eating into your labor. And so that's a big, big waste for a lot of companies, as well as just having like a flow of duties would be another one that I'd say is just knowing that, hey, how do we pass it along? So especially companies that are growing, because as you have one role, the role grows. And so when the role grows, you have to split it in two. And so sometimes people don't always know how to split that role, as say, let's just say an accounting clerk. In the beginning, they might be doing the accounts receivable and accounts payable. We get to a certain point, we need to really separate that role. One's focusing on just AR, one's focusing on just accounts payable. Sometimes those overlap. Sometimes there's a gray area, like warranties might fall into that gray area. And so as they progress, it's just really the processes that you see inside there.
Okay. So with that being said, if you had a magic wand to instantly improve any part of the business,
Mm-hmm.
let's do it two parts actually.
Okay.
If you had a magic wand to instantly improve one part of your business and then one process in a common problem in most of the business of the clients you work with, what would it be?
Oh. For us, more streamlined. Let's see, how would we put this? If I could wave a magic wand, biggest portion that we get held up is on unclassified transactions. So if we could have a better insight on how to see some of these transactions, and usually they don't come from vendors. Usually they usually coming from a credit card statement or these one-offs. But that the amount of time having to get in contact with the owner of the business and try to figure out what it is, and then our team will then need to figure out, okay, if it's for this expense, how do I properly classify that? So 90% of transactions go pretty smooth. It's that remaining 10% that I would try to wave that magic wand at. One for a lot of the problem that would help out a lot of contractors would be, I would say, the ability to train good attitudes better. So
Mm.
in usually the home services industry, there's always a lot of companies complain about the shortage of talent, meaning the people that actually know how to diagnose. But what a lot of them miss is that the importance of an attitude, and so a lot of times in the residential space, the customer service aspect is huge. And so, you can, I always tell everybody it's not easy to teach technical skills, but it's easier to teach technical skills than it is attitude. And then the second part is even if there is an attitude on there, like, hey, how do we fix that? Sometimes it is fixable. I've recommended books, to my team in the past. If they were experiencing negative attitude, they were required to read The Power of Positive Thinking. And so, but a lot of times, you got to decipher between people just being negative or just having a bad circumstance in life. And then just to be able to decipher that and help them out during the tough times, because there's that old cliche that, people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's so true. And we often use it as a cliche, but, caring about our teammates. But I'd wave that magic wand to really help them be able to improve their technical training, so that they could produce more technical, if they could be able to hire, good attitude people who want to learn and succeed, and be able to teach them that technical skill quicker. That's what I would wave a magic wand at.
You think you would be able to get that across to them?
Um, it's hard because a lot of a lot of our, what I'm going to call our non-traditional business owners, some of our younger clientele, we're seeing a lot more women that are owning businesses versus like an older school technician, maybe in his 40s, 50s, has owned a business for a while. They're not as malleable on that, and they still look toward technical skill as a very, very high commodity, and which it is. But a lot of times their customer service is suffering because of that. Because I know a lot of good technicians that don't produce good customer service. And I like working with good technicians. I know how to install an air conditioner, of course, but as far as fixing them and going to a deep diagnosis, that's not ever been one of my personal strong points. But I really admire those who do, who can look through it and go through the details. And I get the theory of it, but the actual application is something different. So, communicating that, but a lot of younger owners are starting to see that. I really notice it more on the generational gaps. So, I notice it more on our non-traditional owners, which I'm going to call women in the trades, which is a growing trend. And then our younger owners, they kind of embrace it a little bit more. More of the millennial generation, moving more toward the Gen Z, I guess would be.
Okay. Very nice. Let's zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
Where do you see yourself with the business a year from now? And what would hitting that goal mean for you?
Hmm. Can you ask that one more time for me, Marvin?
Where do you see your business a year from now? And what would that goal mean for you personally?
I see it continuing to grow. When 2 years ago, no, yeah, coming up on almost 2 years ago, we're looking at it, me and me and Kurt, who's the owner. We looked at it and we said, hey, where is it at now? And it was just a couple of accounts with a couple of bookkeepers. And over the past little bit, we've watched it. We've watched the recurring revenues, double, triple, quadruple. And so, as we're going forward, I always try to remember one of the best lessons. I learned it. I read it in a book from Chick-fil-A. I mean, Truett Cathy stood up at a board meeting and he said, "Hey, don't become bigger, just become better, and your customers will demand you get bigger." So what we try to focus on is growth is always fun. So what I would look at if we could do it a year from now is just really improve our process to get books delivered on a timelier manner. I mean, the 10th is good, but hey, how could we do it on the 5th? How do we get our team results even quicker? Even concepts like, hey, getting a weekly P&L in place. I mean, because hey, right now we're making the decisions on monthly P&Ls. What could it be on a weekly P&L? What if we could pivot our decisions and see our trends a lot quicker instead of waiting for 4 months to see a trend? Now we can see a trend over, 8 weeks, which would be 2 months. And so now we're doing it in half the time, and we can pivot a lot quicker on there, whether it's technician productivity, whether which marketing is working more. But I believe us getting better allows us to serve our clients in more ways. And so that comes down to us offering a better product. So where would we like to be at a year from now is the best at delivering accurate financial statements in the home service industry. If we do that, of course, growing big is fun. The sales are motivating. Like I told you, I was a retail sales rep for a while. And so I led organizations and, cheering on when everybody made a sale. When that happens, that's fun. But, you got to focus in on the quality of that product.
Absolutely. Now, with that being said, what is probably the single biggest challenge between you and that goal right now?
Oh, that's a real good question. The first answer that comes to mind is just repetition. Like
Okay.
I was a I was a wrestler in high school, and so one I didn't know a lot of moves really good, but I knew several moves really good, and that's what my coach told me. He goes, "Hey, if you know a takedown nobody can stop and an escape nobody can stop, you'll be undefeated." And because takedown's worth 2 points, escape's worth one. So if you can always do that, you're always going to be able to come out on top. And so what I do is just it's practice. It's, you've got to have a team, you've got to keep that team treated right because the longer they're with us, there's a learning curve to anything that we do. So the longer that they're with us, the better that they get, or the more that they understand our product. And so, I look at when we hire accountants the same way as when I'd hire a technician. We want to hire good attitude, we want to hire good people. We want to treat them well, and we want to allow them to help take care of the customers. And so, really, just but keeping that. And then the second part that comes to mind is that magic wand question you asked, which was another marvelous question. How do we start to identify some of those transactions? Because a lot of times we'll see it. I can Google it. Google. We've worked with Google AI on some of it. The new feature that they have when I can just copy a transaction and post it, it can tell me a lot of data about where it actually comes from. So knowing that, and then having industry experience, I can then help guide one of our accountants to get that answer a lot better. And if not, I can get pretty accurate with it and enough that when we're reviewing a profit and loss statement, we can just move it over if it was something slightly off than what I'd guessed.
Now, what's one thing a year from now that you hope to be better at personally?
It's really what you deal with, Marvin, is AI. I read, I'm probably going to misquote it, but I read I think it was a tweet or I guess I don't know if they still call them tweets since it's been on X, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know an X or a tweet. But when I think the CEO of Fiverr, he's mentioned something along the lines of, AI is coming for all of our jobs. All right, so it's going to make the easy jobs obsolete. It's going to make the hard jobs the easy jobs, and it's going to make the impossible jobs the hard jobs. All right. At first, it took me a minute to wrap my mind around it. And so then I kind of looked at it like, hey, I compared it to Iron Man from the Marvel movies. So when he puts on the suit, he's a man and he's smart, but when he puts on the suit, he's able to exemplify those. So learning AI and understanding that artificial intelligence and not just using Chat GPT as another Google source, but really utilizing it to automate processes. So how do I get my emails into task? Okay, there's more information being dumped at us. How to, like, even on these when we're using these recorders, how do we get those? And it can print me out a list, but how does that list become an actionable list, and where am I modifying this list at? So learning the AI to personally become better. And because like you said, that the easy jobs will go away. I mean, a lot of the transactional jobs will go away. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere with, I mean, self checkouts. AI receptionists are they've almost become indistinguishable now.
Hmm.
And so a lot of these easier jobs are going to go away. And, I don't know how that'll affect, a lot of our base accounting transactions. We're seeing a lot of that enter into the accounting field. And then the second thing is, embracing our team to utilize this AI so they can now complete harder tasks. And so, like you said, the harder task will become easy. And then, me, what I go for is, some of what I'm doing now is harder task. But hey, how do I embrace AI to do these things which I thought were impossible? And for me, that impossibleness comes to taking action and efficiency. So using like recorders that would, that can do my meetings, but not only just having to go back and review each one of my meetings, but hey, how do I put them all into a system where it's producing me tasks? And now I can almost go to a, a Rett checklist and say, hey, for customer A, you told him you were going to do this week. For customer B,
Yeah.
you told him to do this, because it's a lot easier for me to talk and without writing notes. But when I'm writing notes, of course it helps me out, but utilizing AI, not just
Yeah.
having AI, but utilizing it, becoming a user of it, a embracing it, should we say. So to sum it up, Marvin, I guess the best way is I want to become Iron Man with AI, being able to put AI on so I can I can accomplish more. And whether that's more, whether I can do the same amount of work in shorter amount of time and have more time to spend with my kids and my wife,
Yeah.
doing activities, traveling, whether, now, I remember reading the 4-hour work week, in my 20s. And so I'm sitting there thinking, man, this guy's working from all over the world. And, now I'm doing that with a laptop, and, I'm able to take calls and, to do what I'm doing all over. I've been able to work for a couple of different countries this year, which has been amazing. So, stuff like that is just, is fantastic to me.
Absolutely. Hey, Rhett, one last question for you. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
All right.
What advice would you give to somebody wanting to enter your industry today?
Yeah, I'd say for the home service industry. So if I was giving advice for somebody entering the home service industry, is um, I'll tell it to you in a story. Okay, so like I told you, my family owned a business. My mom remarried my stepdad, who was a boiler and a chiller mechanic. And so from the early days, before I was actually on payroll, I was having to hold flashlights and late night calls when they started a business. And so I grew up around it. And he loves air conditioning. Like I told you, one of those technical people that really understands it. And he's got that. And so I really admire that. But I was sitting in a class, and, I was blessed to be there. And they were all talking about how much they love the air conditioning industry. They love diagnosing problems. And so, but they said the phrase verbatim was, we love the air conditioning industry. We hate the people industry. Now, this was at 20, 21 years old. So I realized at that point, like if I needed to go somewhere, then I wanted to, embrace the people industry. Now, it's good to have the knowledge. Like you need to be able to communicate with, but most importantly, you need to understand people, because people, AI, of course, as we talked about a little bit, is coming for a lot of the jobs. It'll be a minute before it figures out how to arrive to a house and fix an air conditioning unit. It might be there someday. I have no idea what the possibilities are. But for the meantime, is that it's hard for an AI bot, that's probably on a computer, to go under a house and fix a plumbing pipe. So the amount of people going into the trades has shrunk down. It started expanding a little bit more because the demand, of course, has caused the price. But the biggest thing I can advise is learn to be a people person. If you look at the people as just transactionatory, they're gonna act transactionatory. They're gonna if you're able to recruit them for $1 more an hour, they're gonna leave you for $1 more an hour. So you want to be able to build a culture, because the younger technicians that are coming in are more motivated, from what I'm seeing, by time with their family, by understanding what all's going on, and by more rewards. Meaning that, the technicians of old, which that we called them I call them unicorns. Okay. They show up every day to work. They can pass a drug test. They're very highly technical. They're good with customer service, and they do whatever the owner says, whenever the owner says, without any questions. Okay. Those people, they're very far and few in between. And the companies that have them lock them down pretty tight. They're very well taken care of. But the new ones are, you're going to have to explain it a little bit more. Hey, this is why we're doing stuff. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is, without a vision, the people perish. And so you got to let the team know where we're going, and then let them know, hey, what's in it for them? How do they benefit from it? Hey, how do we all work and accomplish this together? And because, when people are on a team and they're contributing and they're growing together, it breeds that. And, and I've been blessed to see that firsthand. And, like I said, when we built the company and, we went from, 4 million up to 11 and a half in 2 years. I mean, it was only because we were able to get people and we were able to keep them happy. And because happy people produce a whole lot more than unhappy. Because I'll end with this, because now a lot of times our business owners, they feel strapped, they feel handcuffed by their technicians, whether they're installation technicians, plumbing technicians, service technicians, electrical technicians. Because, if they decide that they don't want to show up to work today, they feel like they don't have any consequences. And so, because they still need people to run calls. And so, taking care of learning how to take care of people, like we said, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. When you learn how to take care of the people, nurture them, help them achieve their goals, they have no problem helping you achieve yours. And so that would be my biggest set of advice for people entering into the home service industry.
Right.
And
Thank you so
really
much.
any industry in general.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much. That's some great advice you gave. I think that's very huge, and I think a lot of young people need to know that today.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I appreciate you taking the time here today. How can people connect with you or learn about your business?
They can, follow me on Instagram at Rett Jones.
Oh,
Shoot.
you got your full name on Instagram?
Yeah, I got it.
You
Well, I mean,
able
my
to get
name's
it?
yeah, well, my name's Rhett, Rett, so not a very common name. And then
Yeah.
most people spell it with an H. So my mom left out the H. It made for a lot of I got certificates all growing up with Rett. Even though the roster spelled it right, they decided that the roster probably got the H. So was able to get Rett Jones early on Instagram. Or just on
Nice.
Facebook, Rett Jones. And so, I try to keep a lot of my stuff there. And so they're more than welcome to reach out, connect. I mean, I love help. That's why I like what I do with the consulting side, is because when you can, same way that I told you earlier, when you can help other people achieve theirs, then
Yeah.
it's no problem, achieving your goals. I think Jim Rohn said
Jim Rohns. Love that guy.
that.
Right. Thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate it.
And Marvin, I just want to tell you, thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate this opportunity. And any way I can help you in the future, just definitely let me know.